I hope the lighting's okay. When this started off, the sun was around, but now I think the sun's just hiding behind a cloud and it won't come back. Welcome to this video. This is my movie monthly wrap-up type video, and this is for the month of February, where I just talk about the movies that I watched this month. And like always, we are going to start with the movies that I rewatched. There are a lot of movies that I rewatched this month, and you're also going to see a huge theme with the movies because obviously it's February, the month of love, so I watched a lot of my rom-coms, my rom-droms. I watched a lot of those. John Tucker Must Die, They Came Together, Tuck Everlasting, The Death Cure. Yes, I went back to the movie theater and I watched this one again. The Fault in Our Stars, Wimbledon, The Proposal, The Other Woman, The Time Traveler's Wife, What's Your Number, The House Bunny, Maid of Honor, Me Before You, Beauty and the Beast, Win a Date with Tad Hamilton, The Notebook, P.S. I Love You, One Day, and When in Rome. Now I do own a lot more romance movies, but those are the ones I could get to this month. Now on to the new movies I watched this month, and there are 10 of them. Yes, last month I watched 10, this month I've watched 10, next month I'm actually hoping to watch more than 10. Anyway, let's talk about this month. The first movie that I watched this month is Forever My Girl. This is a very Nicholas Sparks-esque type movie. It's not a Nicholas Sparks movie, it's just, it has that Nicholas Sparks feel to it, but it's about a guy who's like a country rock star, and he goes back home and he finds out that his ex-girlfriend has a daughter and he's the dad, and it just turns into this huge mess. But also it's like him and his ex-girlfriend reconnecting after all these years. It was a very like familiar story that's predictable and there's not much suspense to it, but it was still very enjoyable and fun. I think my favorite part about this movie honestly was the music. I am a huge country lover, and so I absolutely adored the music. So I really enjoyed listening to that country music and getting that like country feel from the movie too. It felt very warm. It like made my heart feel warm, you know? The acting was so-so. Like, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. I did feel like there was good chemistry between the characters, and the girl who played the daughter, Billy, she was so good. I loved her and her character in this movie. She had the best lines, she had the best part. Like, if I could play a part in this movie, I would want to play her part. Obviously, I'm too old to play her part, but like, she was great. Another like kind of issue I had with the movie though was the main character. I felt like he kept going back and forth between likable and then unlikable, and you want a character, especially your main character, you want to be able to root for him, but there were some times in the movie where I was just like, really, dude? There were some parts he redeemed himself with, but some parts he didn't, so he was a very like likable but also unlikable character, so it was weird. But I did still very much enjoy it, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched is Lady Bird, and this is just pretty much like an ode to mother-daughter relationships. That's kind of what this movie is. That's kind of the best description I could give. I mean, it follows this teenage girl from high school to when she goes to college, and like I said, it's mainly just following the mother-daughter relationship. But I honestly was disappointed in this movie. I don't know if it was just because I had such high hopes, but I don't know, I felt very meh throughout watching the whole movie. I was bored through most of it, and there were a lot of parts too where people in like the audience were laughing, but I didn't find those parts funny. I was just like, I mean, yeah, I guess it's funny, but I'm not gonna laugh out loud. It's so funny. Like, I don't know, I just felt bored throughout the whole movie. And I think the reason why I had such high hopes for it was because a lot of people were saying they really liked it. It was getting a lot of rave reviews. It's nominated for a bunch of Oscars. I didn't feel anything towards it. The good things about it, though, I definitely did like the mother-daughter relationship in the movie. I felt it was very complex and very realistic and very well thought out. And even like the friendships too, and the like other relationships, just all the relationships in the movie I felt were very well written and very real. And the acting, of course, was absolutely incredible. The acting was so spot on. I don't know, I felt like I felt bored throughout watching the whole movie. And also the ending I didn't feel like was an ending to me. Like it needed more. I don't know, I just felt very unsatisfied at the end of the movie. Was not a fan, so I gave it 2.5 stars. The next movie I watched, Coco. I truly enjoyed this movie a lot. This is a Pixar movie that's also nominated for Oscars. So this movie takes place in Mexico, and we follow this young boy on the Day of the Dead, and his family all hates music. And they all hate music because his great-grandmother's husband left her for music, and so they just ban music. But he loves music, and he loves playing the guitar, and he's loves singing, and he loves dance. He loves everything that has to do with music. And on the Day of the Dead, he finds his way in the world of the dead, and he meets his ancestors, and they all try to help him get back to the land of the living before the end of the night, or else he will end up staying in the world of the dead. But it also is a very cute story about finding yourself, but also bringing family together and finding out the truth. I was just totally invested in the characters, I was invested in the storyline, I was invested in just the whole world in general, which, by the way, the CGI, that was such good CGI. The world they created of the dead, it was just, it was incredible. It was just so visually beautiful, so visually stunning. It was very colorful and detailed and just, so beautiful. And like all Pixar movies, it's very lighthearted and fun, but it also just kind of, you know, punches you in the gut and has that like emotional tug to it as well. And I thought they did a very good job of that, and a very good balance between the lighthearted and the emotional. And I also thought they handled like the narrative of death very well for a kids movie. And I felt the like exploration of the Mexican culture was very fascinating. I will say I was not a huge fan of the music, especially for a movie that's really heavily focused on the music. I didn't find myself dancing in my seat or crying at like the emotional music. I don't know, I didn't feel anything towards the music. But overall, I definitely loved this movie and completely enjoyed it and was completely enraptured by it. So I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. So the next movie I watched is the 1517 to Paris. This movie is about the terrorist attack that happened on the train to Paris. I don't know if anyone heard about that, but it was a big national thing. But there was an attempted terrorist attack on the train to Paris, but thankfully 3 American soldiers, Alec, Spencer, and Anthony, were there and stopped it from really happening and going too far. So they are national heroes, and the thing that really intrigued me with this movie was the fact that those 3 heroes, Anthony, Alec, and Spencer, were portraying themselves in the movie. So they didn't get actors, they got the actual heroes themselves to play the movie, and I was like, that's a big risk, but let's see if it pays off. This honestly was like the biggest letdown I have ever watched in a movie theater. I was so tempted to walk out of the theater because it was so bad. I honestly cringed a lot watching it. It was so bad. Surprisingly, it wasn't the acting that made me cringe. Like, the acting was so-so. Like, it was a lot better than what I was really expecting from them. Like, yeah, they're not actors, but they at least did a pretty decent job with it. I will say the kids, like the kid actors portraying them, their like middle school selves, those kids were horrible actors. It was so horrible to watch. But the biggest issue I had was the writing. Oh my god. Okay, this movie was so boring. The dialogue was so mundane, and the movie just kept dragging and dragging and dragging. The real heroes themselves had a say in the scripts. I know they had a say in like their dialogue. Like they would probably sit there on set and they would say like, yeah, no, this isn't something I don't think I would say, so they would like change it. And they definitely had a say in the story itself. So I appreciate that it was like probably a very realistic telling of what actually happened, but that doesn't mean it's going to portray well on screen. Like when it's a film, you need it to be exaggerated. You need it to up the ante in order for it to actually be exciting. I mean, there was like a whole 20-minute sequence where they're in Europe and they did nothing but just like take selfies with a selfie stick, eat gelato, talk to girls, and it's just like, this is going nowhere. This is literally going nowhere. This has nothing to do with furthering the plot, furthering what's happening. It's just like, hey, here's them on a European trip. And it was just like 20 minutes of that, and it was so boring. There was another scene where I thought it was going to be super epic, and it's when Spencer is in like military class, and then all of a sudden like the alarms go off and there's like a shooter running around the building, and they're all like, hide under the desk, and he's like, no, and he like stands at the door. He puts like a desk to the door, and then he like has a pen in his hand waiting at the door, waiting for the door to open and him to like attack the shooter with like a pen or whatever. And you're just standing there and the music is like duh, 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 and you're just like, okay, he's gonna kill that guy, blah blah blah. It was like getting to that point, and then it just ends with the alarms going off and someone coming in being like, it was a false alarm, it wasn't true, so nothing happened. And I'm just like, what a huge letdown, are you kidding me? I was so mad at the end of that scene. And honestly, I felt the train scene as well, the whole scene that the movie is leading up towards, was boring as well. I mean, it was definitely more exciting than the rest of the movie, but I still sat there just kind of like bored. I don't know if it's because there wasn't really any music in the background. Like I would have loved some like action-packed music to go along with it. The dialogue was just so stiff and mundane and weak, and yeah, no, a huge letdown, and I'm so upset because I really wanted to like this movie, and no. I gave it 1.5 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched is Irreplaceable You. This is a Netflix movie that came out this month about a girl who finds out that she has cancer, and it ends up, you know, taking over her life, and she now has to rethink her life because she's like, I'm going to die. So she's just trying to live her life, but she was also supposed to marry her childhood sweetheart. It becomes a very heartbreaking and beautiful story. I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. It's definitely not perfect. It's definitely not great, but I thought it was good. I felt the acting was so great. Christopher Walken and Gugu were definitely so great at their roles, and I also felt that their characters' friendship in the movie was very refreshing, and I loved it. And it definitely brought some humor to like a movie with such a dark topic. And I mean, it does play around with a lot of the like romance cliches that happen in movies, but I still felt like it was pure and just very heartfelt. I was just absolutely bawling by the end of the movie. I was crying my eyes out. It was just so sad, but so beautiful. And just, it felt so real. So I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched is another Netflix romance movie that came out this month, and that is When We First Met. I was very interested in watching this movie because I love Adam Devine, I love Robbie Amell, I like Shelley Henning, and I also really like Alexandria Daddario. Like, I like the actors that were in this movie. That was the selling point for me. This is a very like Back to the Future, Groundhog Day-esque type movie. But for rom-com. So like it was definitely a rom-com with the rom-com cliches, but it had a very like Groundhog Day feel to it. It's about this guy who is really in love with this girl, but she's marrying someone else and he has been friend-zoned. And so he ends up finding himself going back in time and reliving the day that he first met her over and over and over again, trying to get it right so that her and him are the ones marrying each other. It's definitely very fun and super funny. Like, I love Adam Devine's comedy, and he was so great in this movie. It was so funny. I really did like the concept of this movie a lot. I did feel like it dragged a little bit in the middle. Like, I just felt like I was sick and tired of living this day over and over again, and him redoing everything and then finding the result and not liking it and then going back and trying to fix it and finding out the result and not liking it and going back, and it just felt like it went on a little too long. And I liked that even though it was predictable, it wasn't cheesy. Yeah, no, it was average, but I still had fun. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched is The First Time. I have to admit the only reason I watched this movie is because Dylan O'Brien is in it, and I am so in love with Dylan O'Brien. Who isn't, right? This was one of those independent movies that he did as an actor when he's like trying to make a name for himself. Honestly, I felt like he was the only good part about this movie. He's one of those actors that you can put him in something horrible and he will still be good at it. It's just the rest of the movie is horrible, but he's still good. Like, he was phenomenal. His comedic timing and his facial expressions in this movie were phenomenal. But first, let me just tell you what the story is about. As you can tell from the title, it's about your first time. Like, losing your virginity. The first time you have sex. That's what this movie is about. And it takes place over one weekend, and so this guy meets this girl, they hang out, and then by the end of the weekend, they lost their virginity to each other. Sorry to ruin the ending, but it's kind of what the whole movie is about, so obviously it was gonna happen. The movie was just too awkward for me. Like, I get what they were trying to do. Like, it's supposed to be awkward because it's about your first time, and your first time is always super awkward. So I get that that's the feel that they were trying to convey through the movie, but it was just too awkward for me. Like, I felt like most of the time I was laughing out of awkwardness, and it just felt so weird. I thought it was more of like an average college film. Like, a student in college decides to make a feature-length film, and this is what they do. Like, that's what I felt like when I was watching this movie. I just felt like the script was super boring. Like, yeah, it had its funny moments, but overall it was super boring. Like, there were a lot of scenes where it was literally just the two of them sitting and talking for like 20 minutes. Through those scenes, I would find myself zoning out and then coming back, and then zoning out and then coming back. And there were also just a lot of scenes and dialogue and just parts of the movie that weren't needed. Like, they didn't further the script. They had literally no point to them at all. They were just like thrown in there for filler. I just felt like the dialogue was very cringy as well. Like, I couldn't do it. The pacing was also super slow. The only real saving grace of this movie was Dylan O'Brien, but I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched was Game Night. And spoiler alert, I really loved this movie. I actually went to see it in theaters 2 times. I loved it so much. This is like an action-adventure comedy about these couples that love to do game night together, but then one night, Jason Bateman's character, his brother, decides to host a game night, and he kind of kicks up game night a notch by staging like a kidnapping, and they have to try to find him in order to win the main prize, and it ends up turning real, and it's like real kidnappers that kidnap him and are trying to kill him. It's very fun. I love the concept because I love game nights. It was so funny. Like, this was truly a very funny movie. The jokes were perfectly timed and well delivered, and it didn't feel forced. Like, the humor was not forced. It just felt very natural. The acting, I felt, was very good. The chemistry between Rachel McAdams and Jason Bateman was amazing. I thought they had really great chemistry on screen, and all the other characters too, and their relationships with their significant others was very well done. And it was just so captivating. I loved how there was like twist on top of that twist and then another twist on top of that twist, and there was just like, oh my god. It was a very good looking movie too. I felt like it was very colorful, even though it mainly takes place at night, so most of it's very dark, but it was still very colorful. And I don't know, I just really liked the look of the film. As much as I did love this movie, there was one thing that just like really ticked me off the whole time watching this movie. The opening montage type scene, they have this one friend that's constantly at their game nights, and he has some like truly funny lines, but then he's never seen in the movie ever again. Like, he's in like the first 5 minutes and then he's not in it again. And I'm like, what happened to your friend? Like, does he not come to game nights anymore? Like, what happened? And like, it would have been very nice if he had been in the movie, or even if he had just like come at the end and just been like, hey, what did I miss? Like, that would have been funny. I would have loved that. I just felt like it was weird introducing a character in the beginning that you don't see for the rest of the movie. But overall, no, I absolutely love this movie. Probably one of my favorites I've seen so far this year. Like, I loved it so much. So I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched is Every Day. This is based off of a book that I have not read, but it's about this teenage girl who falls in love with someone who takes over a body every single day. Like, how did they explain it in the trailer? They explained it so well in the trailer, and I don't know how to explain it. But this person always wakes up in a different body. It's never the same person, always someone who's the same age. So this thing just wakes up in different people's bodies every day. So this person is a new person every day, and this girl ends up falling in love with him. We're gonna call him A. It's just a beautiful, tragic love story. I felt like this story had such potential, but it ended up just being a very mediocre film. I'm sure the book is probably better, but as a film, it just kind of fell flat for me. It was still enjoyable. It just kind of felt a little bit boring and again dragged on a little too long for me. I did feel like the acting was pretty good, especially since you had to have multiple actors playing the same person, because obviously A isn't a different person every day, so each actor had to play A the same way the other actor played A. So I felt like the acting was actually done pretty well considering what they had to do with it. I was not a fan of the writing too much, and I also felt like the ending wasn't satisfying enough. Like, I wanted more. Everything that they were building up throughout the whole story, it just kind of was like, okay, great. That gave me nothing. That was pointless. I enjoyed it, but it's not one I'm gonna go see again. But I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And the last movie I watched this month, I actually watched yesterday, the last day of February. I finally got it in, but that is Black Panther. This is a Marvel superhero movie about Black Panther. It's a superhero movie. What else are you gonna expect from it besides great superhero stuff? I liked it, and I see why there is so much hype around it, but I just think maybe I don't like superhero movies. You guys all probably know this. I'm not a huge superhero movie fan. I can never really get into them. The only one I've ever really been able to get into was Wonder Woman, as I've mentioned earlier in videos before. I don't know, I can't get into them. I'm not saying this was bad. This was a really great movie. I see why so many people love it and why there's so much hype around it. But I think I can't get into superhero movies, and maybe the hype was just like so big that I was expecting a lot. Let's just talk about the things that are great about it though, okay? Because this really is a great movie. First of all, the acting is insane. It's so good. Like, oh, they got some really great actors in it. And I was not expecting Michael Jordan playing a villain, but he did such a great job with it. Also, Martin Freeman, like, I love Martin Freeman in everything he does. It was just a little weird seeing him play an American though. Like, I listened to him with an American accent. I was just like, no, you're not American. What is this? I was just like so taken aback by the fact that he was playing an American. My favorite part was definitely the costumes and like the set. What Oh my god, those costumes were so beautiful and so detailed and so intricate, and it looked stunning. The CGI was incredible. I felt the use of color was so well done as well. Oh my god. The cinematography was great. Like, everything was so visually stunning with this movie. I loved that so much. Especially like the opening scene too, where they're like giving the backstory. Oh, that CGI looked so fucking cool. I haven't seen a backstory told in a very cool, beautiful way since Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter movie, when they go into the water and they tell the story of the three brothers and death. This movie was telling the backstory of Black Panther and Africa, and it just looked so visually stunning the way they told the story. It was so cool. I loved that so much. I also can't talk about this movie without talking about the main reason why this is such an important movie for society, because it's a very empowering movie for African Americans. I don't think it's the first movie, but there are definitely not a lot of movies that are like this, where literally every single character and every single actor in the movie is African American. There's only 2 white guys, and the funny thing is, those 2 white guys were both in Lord of the Rings, so I guess you could say they're the Tolkien white guys of the movie. I did not come up with that on my own, unfortunately. I did get that from Tumblr, but I found that very funny. They're the Tolkien white guys. Get it? Because J.R.R. Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings. Anyway, but I also felt it was very empowering for females too, because it had such strong female characters. It's not also just the fact that it has like an all-African cast and it portrays the Africans as heroes. It also is just about, you know, the African culture and the African heritage and their history, and like the highs and the lows and the good and the bad of their world, which honestly I know I have no right to comment on or really say anything about it, because I truly don't know anything about it. But from the Black people that I know who have seen this movie and say that it really is a moment for their culture, I will trust their opinion on that and just repeat what they're saying. So I definitely feel like this is super important to our society, and I see why so many people are loving it and why it has such hype around it. It truly is a good movie. I just couldn't get into it. I didn't feel invested in the story, but that's kind of how I feel about all superhero movies. I just can't ever get invested in the storyline. But it was still very enjoyable, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So that is my movie wrap up for the month of February. I really hope you enjoyed this. Please go check out the books that I read for the month of February, and also just my monthly wrap up in general of things I liked, favorite moments that I had, you know, the whole spiel, the whole thing, you know it. But I will hopefully see you guys again soon with another video.